Hello, Intuition Incubators. This is part 2 of my sacred episode with Red Hawk, author of Self-Observation, Self-Remembering, multiple other beautifully written poetry books. I hope you enjoy all of the information in this episode. This was a gift to me to be able to interview Red Hawk. Listen slowly, listen carefully, listen more than once because there's a whole lot of wisdom in here for all of us. I hope you enjoy.
The ego can only operate in the dark. It cannot stand to be seen. If I see it, I don't have to be it. So if I watch patiently, often enough, my behavior comes to light. To shine a light on that behavior is to bring it out of the darkness and into conscious awareness. Eventually, I begin to see that behavior does not suit me. It doesn't bring me what I want, which is to love and be loved. In fact, it ruins relationships, and it's done so repeatedly in my life. I'll give you an example. My first marriage produced 2 daughters. My wife and I were married 7 years. When we divorced, it was the most traumatic experience in my life, equal to my childhood in terms of trauma. It broke me, my separation from my daughters. It broke me. At that point, at that very point, the pain was so great, I had to decide whether to live or die. I chose to live. Given that existential choice, I stopped blaming other people. I wanted to see what it was in me which has produced this world event, which has shattered my world. Never mind about my wife, there was plenty of blame there. Never mind anybody else, plenty of blame there. Always, what was it in me? And I began to bring the light of consciousness to bear on my own inner behavior. A light shined into a dark room reveals its contents. When its contents are abhorrent, are horrifying, which they were, I still kept observing them. And slowly, what was not necessary melted away. But it takes a long time. Wind and water on stone is a very long, patient process, and self-observation never moves faster than my ability to maintain it. It always operates at my speed. When it gets to be too much, I retreat into the sleeping state, into my old habits. And then I remember, I come back, I observe a little longer, and when it becomes unbearable, what I see, I retreat. It's a process of approach and avoidance, of retreating and coming back. It's a dance with God.
And you don't judge when you stray, right?
No judge. If there's judgment, immediately I know that's the mind, and I'm on the wrong track. This is what I want to see. I want to see the judge. I want to be a witness to the judge. And you see, being a silent witness, this is what that good master Jesus taught. He taught his disciples to be a silent witness. Jesus called it witnessing. In this day and age, we call it self-observation, same thing. Jesus was a workmaster. He was teaching his disciples how to observe themselves, how to remember themselves. This ye do in remembrance of me. Who is the me? Me is God speaking. Love speaking. True love. The greatest teaching the good master Jesus ever gave humans was this: God is love. It completely broke apart the ancient Hebrew teaching. God is judgmental. God is angry. God will punish. Jesus got rid of all of that in one statement. God is love. So when real love is the divine in me.
So I have two questions about your story. Why one is, why is it that it takes that breaking for us to begin to have the desire to have conscience wake up, as maybe you would say, in us, and have
Yeah,
the desire to look inward? And B, why does that not even happen for some people? Why is it that even in that phase some people choose not to look inward and just continue to blame?
that's a really important question, Abby. So I'm going to say, number one, that the greatest motivational force in human nature is pain. The greater the pain, the greater the urgency to change something.
Mm.
Unless pain and suffering are my love language.
Right.
If pain and suffering are the love language of the child within, I will continue to seek it my whole life. And it takes a shock of major emotional impact to begin to awaken in the person the question, oh, who am I? What is this? And it requires, and the work calls it magnetic center. Some people are attracted to this work. They are attracted to spiritual practice. Why? Well, it could be that I have suffered for many lifetimes from this very same thing. And okay, so that gets into the question of many lifetimes. And does the soul have many lifetimes? Of course it does. The soul is not ever born. The soul never dies. The soul is immortal. But it goes through many human incarnations, and it brings the same flaw into each of those incarnations. The same flaw, until eventually there is a force that's built up around that suffering that reaches a tipping point, let's say. And the tipping point may be this lifetime. For me, it was. For me, it was the divorce and separation from my children. That was the tipping point for this particular soul's journey, which caused it to turn towards spiritual practice. And you know, organized religion was never enough for me. It did not meet my needs. It was full of hypocrisies. I loved that good master Jesus, but I did not love the church. I required a spiritual practice which was alive for me, which helped me, which showed me what can I be doing right now. Never mind the future. If you do these things in the future, you'll be a good man. I want to know, what can I do right now to become a decent human being? And when I met self-observation and self-remembering, a light went off in me, and I recognized I can watch my thoughts. I will get identified with them over and over, and then I come back to my body. Attention is embodied in breath and sensation. I am attention, and I am presence. That's what the soul is. The soul has two qualities: presence and attention. Attention is a function of the soul. So the work gives me a single practice with two aspects. Self-remembering invokes the presence of the soul into the present. Self-observation invokes the attention of the soul. So present attention is objective love. That's what we work for. We work to remain present as attention, no matter what the circumstances or the conditions or the impulses of the mammal.
Now, how do you know that the soul is coming back many lifetimes? How do you know that?
I don't have to know that. I don't have to verify that. All I have to know is that my past, what happened in my history, has colored what is happening right now. I am the result of my past. And so all I have to know is that what I do now will decide what I do next. What I did before is deciding how I act now. So if the law, as above, so below, is true, then the soul is subject to what has happened before. It may just be this lifetime. There may not be another lifetime. This may be the only lifetime. Perfectly okay. So what I do today will influence my tomorrow. How do I want my tomorrow to be? I want to do today what I wish to be now. And that will influence what happens tomorrow. Never mind past lives. Not important. What matters is that the past is not what must be my guide now. Now is what must guide me. What's present now, right in front of me, will show me what I need to do now. Not based on the past, not on the hope of the future, but what's needed and wanted right now will be obvious if my attention is riveted in the present.
One of the things that I love about the work and everything you're saying is that it's so married to the human experience.
Yes.
So it's not about this woo-woo spiritual or positive thinking or love is all we are, blah, blah, blah. It's literally, I mean, everything you've said is just drawing back to what is happening in this moment in your human experience and observing that as a vehicle, I think what you're saying, to get to conscience, to get to God.
Life is the vehicle for the work. It's called the fourth way. The fourth way is work in the world, not in a monastery, not in a yogic posture, not in a fakir adopting a pose and never moving until the body becomes a rigid statue. No, the fourth way, the way of the work, is the way in life. Paula Darcy, who's a person I have a lot of respect for, had this quote, "God comes to us disguised as our life," unquote. So, so the love of God is disguised as Abby Haberman. The love of God is disguised as Robert Moore or Red Hawk. We are all the love of God disguised as an individual being, and that's a real good disguise because we believe in the individual being as all there is, and we identify with it. We don't understand that I live as the love of God only. It's the love of God which animates this life, and the love of God which speaks and acts in all circumstances. And so self-observation is about seeing in me what in me prevents the love of God from manifesting in this moment with this person.
Well, and what's so frustrating is the inability, the continued habitual inability to just act and be as that love of God, right? To continually find myself, stepping in it, whatever it is, right?
Not only
like
stepping in it, covered with it, Abby.
covered, whatever it is, whether it's self-righteousness, whether it's guilt, whether it's shame, whether it's anger, whether it's fear, you can live and breathe a spiritual practice, but you cannot. Like some days, I just feel trapped in my mind and body. Like I can have an aim, but I can't. It's like I can't. It's so that observation is so hard, and I guess that's why you have to labor for it, right, over decades and decades.
The mammal is a forgetting machine. The mammal is a forgetting machine.
Yeah.
The habit body has momentum. We have practiced from the habit body a lifetime. You don't just drop the habit body in an instant. It takes wind and water on stone. This work is not easy. It's difficult because I forget. I forget all the time. This work is moment to moment, returning to the body, remembering the body, embodying attention, which is who I am, in breath and bodily sensation, present. The body serves as a objective feedback mechanism for the being to orient itself in the present, because the body is always only a present phenomenon. If I want to know if I'm present or not, I just have to know, am I sensing my body? Can I find my breath? Can I straighten my posture? Can I move attention from the head, brain, down into the solar plexus? Can I reposition myself and the center of gravity of myself as attention in the body? And then I forget, and boom, the attention goes right back to the head brain.
Yeah.
And I'm lost in thought. Why? Because I've spent a lifetime there. So it's slow, which is why many people want a quick fix. Well, I don't have a lifetime. Well, that's all you've got.
Yeah,
all
but you
you've
gotta
got is a
work,
life.
you gotta take care of your family, you got a lot of other things to do. Like a lot of people will hear this and be like, this is so self-absorbed. Who has time to, who has the luxury of, thinking about themselves all the time? That's how
Well,
some of this will be heard,
that's
right?
good. That's good. So the work is about external considering.
Yes.
That means I stop placing myself at the center of life, and I place myself in relationship with others. Self only is infantile. The work moves me eventually from self only to self and others. I stop being the center of life, and I see that relationship is the center of life, and relationship is self and others. And slowly, when I begin to consider others' feelings, there is another shift which happens. It moves to a whole nother level, and the other level becomes others' self. I move from self only to self and others, and eventually the evolution of the being shifts to others' self. Do you understand the difference between self, others, and others' self?
Yeah.
Explain.
Yeah.
Explain what you understand.
My understanding is that you go from focusing on yourself so that you can observe yourself, so that you are eating those pieces of your ego,
Yes.
in an effort to externally consider others, right? And as you eat the ego, and over time, at your being is like, the being is love, so it's automatically considering others first,
Yes.
and so that's the
Others.
automatic thing eventually.
It moves. Self-observation moves me from self only to self and others. I begin to include others in my observation. So it's not just about me anymore. I include others. Eventually, the evolution is others become first, self, others, and then self. It's not that I place others above me.
Right.
That never happens. It means that I place others before me.
And
I consider the need of the other before my own need, but I don't stop meeting my needs. I simply place the other's need first. I'm not selfish, in other words, anymore. I have my needs. I make sure my needs get met, but the other's needs become paramount.
Right. And I think about that in terms of like when I think about that, I feel like that's a moment in which you are so rooted in your your being, your um so rooted in an inner in a knowing and a I guess what you would say conscience that you would put others first. There's no threat to you. There's no fear anymore. There's no
That's right.
concern. So
That's
you
right.
and so when you say the middle part, uh, it's self and others, are you saying you're considering yourself and your behavior's impact on others? Is that what you mean by that space of time where it's self and others?
When I'm at the point in evolution of the being where it's self and others, self still comes first. I'm considering others,
You're
but
considering
self
how you
comes first.
impact. You're considering others in general, how you impact others
Yes,
and others in general, but still it's me first.
yes, it's me. It's about me first. And it doesn't mean I exclude others. I want to be in relationship with others, but my needs being met first are paramount. At
Yeah.
some point, and you see, every mother has experienced the other's self. Every mother, not every mother, that's not right, but many mothers have considered, have lived placing others before self. But what the problem is when self gets eliminated, and
Yeah.
those needs never get met. Now you've got a frustration. Now you've got an unbalanced life. Others before self doesn't mean self's needs get completely obliterated. It means that they will be met. And frankly, at this point where others come first, the being is completely satisfied by serving. Its needs are met by serving. Its needs are met by being at the service of the will of God. It is completely fulfilled by this service. You get a Mother Teresa, for example. This is one good example.
Yeah.
The need of the being at that point is to serve the will of God. And it's completely fulfilled when that happens. When I might as well say its need is met by serving love. Whatever love needs, I meet that need and I am satisfied. I am fulfilled. And I will say this is far from me now, but I'm told that the fourth level, the final level of evolution of the being is others only. Well, that's Jesus. That's Buddha. That's Krishna. That's Lao Tzu. That's maybe Mother Teresa. I don't know. That's not me. I'm not there. That's when there is no self. The self has disappeared completely, and the will of God is everything.
Ugh.
The only thing that exists anymore is the will of God.
So far to go. So far to go.
Well, you see, that's the thing. Is I do what I can with what I've got, where I am, and I thank Tom Logan for that. And that's Mother Teresa. I do what I've got. I do what I can with what I've got, where I am. Period.
Yeah.
And I do as much as I can at any given moment without blame or shame. And I continue to allow the practice to evolve me, to change me. Wind and water changes stone. The ego is a stone, and it has to be worn down slowly by patient observation. Wind and water.
Wind and water.
It's a slow-going process, but it's inevitable change. It will change, but it's slow.
So, do you have time for a few more questions?
Anything you want.
Okay. I wanted to, because I've got a couple more. I wanted to I want to read this poem that you and I talked about that I was my favorite, and I know you've mentioned a lot of people mention it to you. Um, and it's called You Don't Know What Love Is. And I want to read it as a vehicle for you to kind of talk about the different eyes. And for people that, aren't understanding what that means, we don't mean like eyes to see. We mean like the I am,
Yeah.
lowercase I versus the I,
Yes.
which is conscience. So this is Red Hawk's poem, You Don't Know What Love Is. On the way home to the picnic, I stopped to buy an apple pie and the big bag of corn chips, my favorites. We get there and drink beer, grill burgers, and have a good time. Just to show what a good guy I am, I leave them the rest of the apple pie, but I wrap and fold the corn chips carefully and place them next to our cooler so they will come home with us. They are my favorites. The next day, I go to the kitchen for corn chips, but they are nowhere to be found. I look everywhere, and then I go in the laundry room where she is doing the wash, and I ask her, Where are the corn chips? I left them there to be nice, she says. And that is how the fight starts. It goes on, but it ends the way they always end. She is in tears, and when I try to comfort her by saying I love her, she says, You don't love me. You don't know what love is. And I am thinking, not out loud, of course, that's a goddamn lie. I love those corn chips. This poem resonated so much for me. I laughed out loud. I read it to my husband immediately, but I would love for you to talk about it's just so good. I would love for you to talk about the meaning behind it and these different. Well, I thought what came to mind for me, but I'm sure much more behind it. But as I was reading this, was the different eyes that show up. But speak to whatever you want to speak to about that poem, because it's actually the next chapter is actually about the multiple eyes. This actually came in the chapter that's about the default position, the first responder.
The most One of the most difficult teachings the work brings, the most difficult for people to grasp, and even as a theory, is that I am not a single unified I. That when I say I wish, I want, I this, I that, it's never the same I speaking at any given moment. That there are, in fact, hundreds of I's in me, all of themselves calling themselves I. Every one of them says I. I want. I die. I like. I don't like. The mind is a binary computer. It's a like-dislike computer. These I's are always aligned with I like or I don't like. I want, I don't want. Every I has its own agenda. And it will gain control of attention by identification. Each of these eyes is dangling some bait in front of attention, which is what I am, in order to get attention to identify with its bait so it can enact its agenda. Its agenda is maybe to eat a whole bag of cookies. Its agenda may be enact revenge on somebody for something they did, whatever. Every eye has an agenda. And none of those eyes are interested in this work. All of those eyes are interested only in getting what they want when they want it, period. And it doesn't matter if it kills you. I want another cigarette, never mind if it kills you. I want another drink, never mind if it kills you. I want more of this drug, never mind if it kills you. Those eyes dominate us, and we believe in them, each one. We identify with each of them. And the real I, which is the being, which is housed in this mammal body temporarily, is lost in identification. Those eyes control what we call love. I love those corn chips. That's what what one eye calls love.
Right.
I love how she looks when she's dressed like that. We call that love. But we are many eyes, and those eyes dominate my life. And until I begin to see what a crowd I am, how I'm controlled by these eyes. One eye says I want to watch TV, and my wife wants to go out to eat, and there's a conflict. All conflicts in relationship are two eyes in conflict. So the work begins to solidify an I which is immovable, which is the being. The being begins to emerge slowly as the real I. And conscience, when it awakens then, can awaken the will to intervene and stop identification with those smaller eyes, those eyes which care nothing for love, they care nothing for the work, they care nothing for anything except what they want when they want it. And that is a very difficult process, and it entails great suffering, because those eyes suffer when I don't give them what they want. And that suffering is called intentional or conscious suffering.
Or is that voluntary suffering? Is that the voluntary suffering? Same thing?
Yes. This work is about conscious labor, which is the labor not to identify. And it's called voluntary suffering because I see what I am. I see I'm not what I pretend to be. I'm not what I tell other people I am. I'm not what I've always created this image of who I am. Well, I'd never do that. Well, I do that all the time inside. Whatever it is, I'd never do that. I do it. I am that. And so I suffer. I suffer what I see. And I suffer without judging, without trying to change it. I suffer it. I suffer its consequences. And I don't move from it. I continue to shine the light of consciousness on my inner world. And those eyes, one by one, begin to lose their power over me, but it's slow. With me, it's food. My love language is food. And my identification with food is powerful. It goes way back to my infancy. It goes right back to being pulled from my mother's breast and placed for adoption. And that is what we have to work with. That's our yoke. That's our food. That's what we must eat in order to evolve as a being.
So I have that. I have the same food. So if you're suffering, do you suffer while you watch yourself eat all the corn chips, or are we suffering, or is the voluntary suffering when we're not giving into that little I that wants to eat all the corn chips?
It's both things, Abby. It's both things. Sometimes I don't do what the I says. I intervene from conscience. And now whatever that I is, it begins to have a tantrum because it's a small child. It has a tantrum. How that I tantrums is this. It begins to throw up the image of the corn chips, throwing them up. It won't let it alone until it gets what it wants, or it dissolves and another I takes its place. Sometimes the most I can do is to watch while I eat those corn chips, and I may eat half the bag. And I watch, and I cannot stop myself. St. Paul, in Paul's letter to the Corinthians, says, "Oh, woe is me, I do that which I hate." This is clearly a man who's been taught by his master self-observation.
Right.
And so sometimes only hindsight can be available to me. After the fact, I suffer because I see what I did again, yet again. I did it. And I couldn't stop myself. Okay, so hindsight eventually, slowly, becomes insight. And insight means that I can see beforehand what's going to happen and I can alter my course. I can do something else. That's a point in the work which is more evolved. But I'm not there. I'm still caught by those eyes in me. Sometimes I'm not caught. Sometimes I am able to maintain my position inside, to be still. When the eye comes, I can be still inside. I can become a silent witness. I can watch and observe. And what happens when I can do that is that eye is consumed by attention, and it becomes food.
Right.
It doesn't mean it goes away, but it means it's lost some of its power. And over time, wind and water, that eye gradually, the body is able to transform the energy into a finer energy, which is food for the being. The yolk is consumed by allowing it to be there without reacting.
I was gonna say that it seems like that is the most important part to me, as I've experimented with this and seen myself um, eating all the things and having no idea what happened until hindsight and being like, holy
Yeah.
crap, what just happened? Or eating all the things, just thinking to myself, oh, I shouldn't do this. I shouldn't, right? And that non-judgmental part seems like, sometimes that's the most I can achieve is,
So here's
yeah,
the way it works. The first stage is I eat the corn chips and I have no idea what happened because I'm completely lost in identification.
yeah,
And only afterwards do I realize I was completely taken. I wasn't present. I was completely identified. All right. Slowly, what happens is I eat the corn chips and I see what I'm doing and I'm suffering as I do it and I see that I can't stop. This is real suffering.
right.
This is suffering in the fact. What does that say, Chandrika?
I'm going to Alice.
Okay. Good, thank you. So as it's going on, I'm suffering. I'm not suffering later. This is a shift. You see? You
Yes.
understand?
Yes.
I suffer as I'm doing it, and I see that I can't stop. That's real suffering.
Yeah.
That's suffering of a much different level and intensity.
Yeah.
And eventually I'm told, and I don't know this I know this for a fact because sometimes I don't identify with that I, and the body takes that energy of that I and it transforms it because I remain stationary. I'm still. I'm not moving towards it or away from it. I'm just watching. That energy is transformed in me into a very much finer substance. Ancient traditions call that prana. That prana then is transferred to the being because energy can neither be created nor destroyed. This is Newtonian physics. It can only be transformed. The energy of that I, when I remain still, unmoving, watching, is transferred to the being and the being is fed. When I identify, the energy of attention feeds that I and it grows stronger because the law is what gets fed grows stronger, what doesn't get fed weakens. Slowly, sometimes it doesn't get fed. Every time it doesn't get fed, it gets a little weaker.
So
Is this beautiful? Don't you love this?
No, I don't. I do not. Because, to be totally honest, because what sucks about it is that you can have, though. I mean, I obviously have had far less than you, but I have had moments where it's still, the eye is still, and I can, gather myself and just watch and not give in to the small eye. But there's literally zero guarantee that type of stillness or presence is going to be there again. In fact, there's more of a guarantee that tomorrow I'm going to lose the battle, on it.
That's correct.
It's
That's correct.
So, it like this light, and I think, to your point, you said, we want a quick fix. And I know my teacher always says to me, I mean, he says it to me almost every time I talk to him, you can't jump over your knees. And my parts are just like, but I want to jump over my knees, and then the mind tries to get around it. And how can I do, and and it's mind boggling, I guess, for lack of a better word. But I wanted to ask you, to talk for a moment about aim, because I feel like this is really, when I'm connected, for example, if I think about aim in a smaller way, if I'm connected to my aim around being able to have self-possession and connect to myself in those moments, my aim is to be healthier, to not, whatever. And if I can connect with my aim in that moment at some higher level, then I might not give in to that lower eye. But my aim is often nowhere to be seen at that point. So I wonder, from the work perspective, you talk about, because you mentioned it a long time ago and I wanted to come back to it. What is aim? What is having an aim? Why do you want to have an aim? What is the aim?
That's an important question.
Yeah.
That's an important question. So there are large aims. My large aim is to awaken and to be present always and everywhere. That's an aim that's too far away. It's impossible right where I am now. But it's there. I recognize that that's something. That's the top of the mountain. I'm at the bottom of the mountain, and I want to get to the top eventually. But in order to get to the top, it requires I take a step. So every step should have an aim. All right, so I'll tell you what my aims are right now. I have small aims of the moment. My aim of the moment today, one aim is I won't eat anything until I have a bowel movement. Now there's an aim that's practical. And until my gut has released its contents. All right, I have another aim. It's a practical aim. I'm studying right now self-importance. Mm-hmm. I want to see how self-importance manifests in me. And one of the primary aims of that study in me is to see what offends me. Because I am so easily offended, Abby, by everything. I'm offended by the news I watch on television. I'm offended by my wife's tone of voice. I'm offended by dropping the pen on the floor when I was trying to write something. I'm offended by stumbling over something that's in my way. I'm offended. And you see, we spend most of our lives offended. Self-importance requires that. It requires that I be offended by the deeds and misdeeds of other men and women. And my whole life is taken up by these various small eyes being offended. So my study of self-importance is really, I want to see what offends me, because there's self-importance.
Yeah,
my
that's
other study right now. Okay.
I was just
my
going
other
to say
study now is.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Say that again. Say that again. What you said.
I was just going to say it's such a good one because it's and again it brings back to, like, that's why I love this study, because it's so human. It's not, there's no morality in it. It's just part of our being human. And
there is no right or wrong in this work. There's only watching.
Yeah.
And that allows life.
That allows me to look at the self-importance, right? I mean, it allows me to hang up the phone with a customer service person and be like, "God, you weren't very nice."
Yeah.
You were
Yeah.
offended by how long it took them, and what, like, constantly, right? I mean, and in relationship, I mean, I think that happens all the time. If
Look,
my husband is irritated, I'm irritated immediately. That he's irritated.
absolutely.
you
Yes.
know?
So what is it in me which is offended? I want to see. I want to feel it. I want to see and feel it. And you see, it's not wrong. This work is not about being wrong. Because whatever it is that is in me, whatever I manifest, it was necessary for survival at some point in my life. And I respect it. I honor it. It worked. It got me here.
Yeah.
And now it's no longer useful, and I can begin to watch it and see and feel it and feel and see it's not working anymore. I want to read you a quote from Mr. E.J. Gold, who's a very important help to me. This is from his book, The Human Biological Machine is a Transformational Apparatus. Very important book. Here's the quote. The single greatest technique for work on self is to embrace the unpleasant manifestations of others without resentment, expressions of displeasure, or the demand for intelligence, reason, justice, or conscience on the part of others. Embrace silently and cheerfully and suffer in the stew pot of tension, unquote.
Oh, I read that somewhere. Yeah, that's so good.
Others become a tremendous value for me, which is why this work is there's three levels of this work: work on self, work with others, and work for the work. Work with others is crucial because I fool myself, I lie to myself, I'm identified with those lies, and when I work with others, it brings forth all of those things which I wish to observe and refuse to see.
Right.
Others become valuable for me because they bring out in me every one of those eyes.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I know for myself, absolutely, and probably, maybe just like a very small amount of people, but for me, the eyes come to a point where they don't want to be in contact with other people because it is coming to terms with those things. It does bring up the ugliness or the parts of the personality that my ego doesn't want to see. And so it's like, well, you know what, I'm just not really fit to be in society. Like, I just need to stop being around people. But to your point, that's where it all comes up. So if you're going to study, that has to happen, right? You can't be a monk.
This work is about work in relationship, period.
Yeah.
It cannot happen alone. This work is about relationship and is about empowering relationship.
So speak to the work for the work, because that's interesting. That's
No,
really
I want to talk. I don't want to talk about that yet. I want to talk more about aim.
Okay, yeah.
Without aim, my life is aimless. Without aim, there is no work on self. It has to be work with aim. And I start out with aims which are too ambitious and they don't help me. I gradually, slowly, common sense begins to tell me, okay, I have an aim with those corn chips. And here's the aim with those corn chips. I'm going to put a certain amount of corn chips in a small bowl. My aim is to honor that bowl of corn chips.
I've done that.
Thank God for these corn chips because they remind me of my work. These corn chips become a reminding factor, and I will eat those corn chips, but my aim is to eat only what is in that small bowl and to not go back for a second helping. Right. That's my aim. My aim is to have a bowel movement before I have granola. You see, these are practical aims. All right, and then a larger aim. I want to study self-importance. I've got it. I've narrowed things down, and I see that self-importance is a really important factor in how I behave. So I want to study that. Or I see that identification is the problem. I want to begin to see what attracts my attention. What diversions, distractions do I have in order to avoid being present? Because the chief feature, we get back to that, the chief feature is what's called a chronic defense mechanism. The chronic defense mechanism is always on the alert to defend itself against being present. Because when I'm present, those eyes can't operate. They can only operate through identification. The chronic defense mechanism always, immediately when this work comes into play, and I begin to remember myself, it can't tolerate that. And it immediately begins to dangle bait to capture attention, to capture identification of attention, so that I go back into the sleeping state, into the state of mechanical operation, habitual, mechanical, unconscious. That's the only way it can survive.
So the chief feature is an automatic defense mechanism to keep me from waking up, from being conscious, from being present. So whatever the chief feature is, if it's, let's call it self-loathing or whatever it is, whenever my being is trying to awaken, or that's my aim, my eyes will come in some form under that is encompassed within self-loathing. And
yes, that's exactly right.
Okay. So, and that could be, for example, like overeating, right? That could be under self-loathing.
That's absolutely right. All of those eyes serve chief feature. They are all handmaidens of chief feature. And chief feature is the central organizing principle around which those eyes operate.
So if I'm trying to write a book and I'm completely getting frustrated and unable to do it day after day, year after year after year, I'm just getting confused, constantly confused. That is something that my chief feature, whatever it is throwing up in my way, that is getting in the way of divinity coming through me and words coming out of me. Is that also accurate?
Confusion, contradiction, and conflict are the means by which the mind maintains its control over attention. So in order to write the book, the way I wrote self-observation and self-remembering, and the way I write my poetry, I sit down, I get quiet inside, I pray for what I want, I wait for the response, and the divine delivers to me what it is I pray for. So I have to signal the divine. And look, love will not enter except by invitation. The divine never, ever forces itself. The divine will not enter by force. It only enters by invitation. And the invitation is a still body, is a relaxed body, is stillness. When there's stillness, the divine loves a void. The Newtonian physics says nature abhors a void and rushes to fill it. God loves the void and rushes to fill it. The void is absence of self.
And, that reminds me of something that you say in self-observation. You say that the work that the work is not interested in um, what people traditionally want to give it. The work is interested if you want to give yourself importance, if you want to show your guilt, if you want to show up with these things, then the work is interested. Is that right? That's what you say, right?
Let me just, I want to take a minute with what you've just said and think about what you've just said. The work only gets interested in me when I am willing to struggle with self-importance. The work only responds to hold on. I want to take a minute now because this is interesting what you've just said. The work gives in proportion to what it is given. That's what I want to say. The work demands to be fed, and it's always looking for a food source. And wherever it finds a food source, it goes there. So, for example, my master, Mr. Lee, assigned me a certain task in this work. And I deliver. I'm speaking to you right now because that's part of the task I was given by Mr. Lee, is to talk about this practice. He assigned me to write those 2 books. And my position in this work is to talk about the practice of presence, self-remembering, self-observation. The work keeps giving me more tasks to do, like talking to you.
Yeah.
Because it gets fed. Because I do what it asks of me. This is work for the work now that we're talking about.
Right.
And so the work only gives as much as it's given. The more it's given, the more it gives. And that means, and what it means for me is the more tasks is assigned to me and the more difficult they are, and the more I feel it's completely over my head, and I am thrust in a position of trusting God completely because I know I can't do this. I don't know enough. I was asked to go to France, and I spent 2 weeks doing self-observation intensive in France, way over my head. I had to simply sit in the chair, get quiet inside, invoke the name of my master, and wait to be shown what to do. And also, as I give more to the work, the resistance in me grows stronger as well, because it has to be, the food has to be equal to the effort. The greater the effort, the greater the food. So the resistance grows as the work grows to keep pace.
So I think you just answered a question I had, which is, of course, I would tell you, like, hey, I'm happy to give the work my self-importance. I'm happy to give the work my guilt. Like, take it off my hands. I'm always saying, God, take this. Like, I clearly can't handle it. But what you're saying is that's still a smaller I in me, not wanting to feel discomfort, not wanting to be, this way. The difficulty is in coming face to face with those parts when they show up, and grappling with them and struggling with them and seeing them and voluntarily suffering them. Then the work is interested.
Come face to face is a really good way of saying that, Abby. They don't go away. They don't change. Here's what changes. My relationship with them changes.
Right.
My attitude about them changes. I begin to value them. Instead of hating them, I begin to honor them because they are reminders of my work. They remind me of my work. And I need to be reminded because I forget. I'm a forgetting machine. So I need to be reminded. And they remind me. So my relationship with them changes. They don't change.
So I want to ask you just my final questions because you've just been so unbelievably generous with your time, and I appreciate it so much. And I guess it's because Mr. Lee told you you had to.
Yeah. It's because conscience tells me. See, Mr. Lee's dead.
Yeah. um, so tell me how this all relates to intuition, because we are on the intuition incubator. And what is your definition of intuition?
I'm going to say, first of all, the work teaches us that we have two higher centers in us, which are in constant operation, but they do not reach us because they're overwhelmed by ego, by thought and emotion. The two higher centers are higher intellectual center and higher emotional center. And those are those are what conscience is composed of. Higher emotional center is conscious love. Higher intellectual center is objective clarity. All right, so this work has two aspects. It's a single practice. The practice of presence is composed of self-remembering and self-observation. And that's because the being, which is what I am, has two aspects: presence and attention. So self-remembering invokes presence. Self-observation invokes attention. Higher emotional center is what we call inspiration. Higher intellectual center is what we call intuition.
Yeah.
Inspiration and intuition are always available to us if I get still inside. They can then reach me. So when I was asked to write the book on self-observation, I didn't know how to do it. I felt helpless. I sat down. I got still. I asked Yogi Ram Surat Kumar and Mr. Lee. Yogi Ram Surat Kumar is the master, the head of our lineage, the godchild of Tiruvannamalai, India. I asked them to show me the way. Intuition and inspiration reached me, and immediately they gave me the table of contents, almost exactly as it appears in the book. And that's how I began. I began with the table of contents, and each one became a chapter, and each chapter became an aim and a work of its own accord, by itself. One by one, one step at a time. The top of the mountain was the book, but I was at the bottom of the mountain. The first step was to get the table of contents. The next step was to work with chapter 1. And step by step, I got to the top of the mountain, but it was step by step. It was a slow process. It was moment to moment. It was day by day.
Yeah.
So intuition and inspiration are always there. Intuition is higher intellectual center. It knows the future. It can tell me what's going to happen before it happens. And everybody experiences this. I knew I shouldn't have done that. I felt that, and I knew it was wrong, and I did it anyway. How many times have we said that?
Right, 1,000.
And we don't pay any attention because it's overrun by the eyes and their demands on us. And their demand is identification.
Yeah, and identification is sucking our attention.
Yes. It's taking our attention away from receiving what's coming from higher centers.
So when we say, just to remind everyone, when we say identification, it's, oh, I feel this way. I think that this person said this. I can't believe that is happening. We become identified with these thoughts or stories in the mind, and it's taking all of our attention. And if our attention is being sucked up, our attention is not available to get these higher centers information.
Identification means I am that.
I am that.
I am that thought. I am that emotion. I am that tension in the body. I am that body, etc. Attention is I am that.
So I want to ask, because I don't want anybody to walk away from this conversation with a different understanding. I really want to ask this question. What is the difference? Because you referred to your master, you referred to your lineage, you referred to doing what they tell you to do. How is that different than organized religion? I want to get this out. I want to make sure there's no confusion.
The function of a master, Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, Lao Tzu, Ma Ananda, Mai Ma, anybody, any master. The function of a master is to act as an external conscience until the disciple has awakened the conscience in herself. Once the conscience is awakened in herself, the master becomes a reminding factor, keeping her on track. When conscience awakens to the point where it is the active force in her, the master no longer has a function. Now the master is in her and is her only guide. So conscience is the absolute ultimate aim of this work. It is absolutely important because the human race has no conscience. It acts according to herd instinct. Only a human individual can have conscience, and that conscience can be awakened, but it is difficult. It's laborious, and it causes suffering. And most people don't want to do that. They want to be told what to do. A master who tells you what to do and does it for the rest of its life is no master. A master will set difficult obstacles in front of me and compel me to meet those obstacles. And by meeting those obstacles, something awakens in me and I become independent and free. And then conscience is my master. And that external master, that external conscience, which is what the work is an external conscience until I absorb it, until conscience awakens in me. The work is a map of how conscience operates in life. That map becomes absorbed, digested in me until conscience becomes the internal guide.
Thank you for that. So as we close here, Red Hawk.
Well, wait, hold on. One more thing, Abby. One more thing.
Yeah.
Religion never lets you go. Religion never lets you go.
Yeah.
Religion always requires you be dependent upon it. You're a sinner. You're no good, and you won't be any good until you rely on this, and you do what we tell you, and you never ever stop doing that. It's an external source, and it keeps being an external source that supposedly tells me right from wrong. But if you look at what so-called Christians are doing, they do terrible things. They lynch black people. They rape, they lie, they cheat, they steal, and they will say, "We do this in the name of Jesus." Well, poor Jesus.
I'm so glad you. Yes, and I'm so glad you said that because, like, to me, that was in my head, but I'm glad you said it out loud and like, can you can apply this too to what we started out talking about around the morality around like politics or something. Politics can be a religion for people. And
Yeah.
it's the same thing, is it not? It's that doesn't have to do with awakening yourself. It's you do
I'm
what
going to say this.
this says.
Conscience, conscience never, ever forces itself on others. Religion constantly forces itself on others.
Yeah. Yeah. So your book Self-Observation, you told me, is translated into 13 languages and it's read
Yeah,
all over the
so far.
world.
Yeah.
And you also told me, and when it was my teacher came upon it and mentioned it to me, and he told me, read it very slowly. And when you and I spoke, you said yes, you've got to read it slowly. You said read it at least 3 times, and then you said that there are groups of people around the world that are reading it at a sentence level, over a decade's time. Can you, and I highly recommend anybody who is listening to this to get that book. I don't think it would have landed with me the same way if I had read it 3 years ago or something, or even last year. Um, and I'm sure it will land with me different if I read it next year. But can you just say, for people to know before we end, why is it important? How are people reading this book sentence by sentence?
The groups that I'm asked to join periodically, and I do them about once a month. Some of these groups have been working for 4 or 5 years, have read this book half a dozen times, and each time what they do, at some point, I said the book should be read 3 times, and that's just a kind of rule of thumb. It's not a demand. But the first time one reads it for information only, the way you would read any other book. But when they read this book, if the information ignites something in them, something is ignited, they read the book a second time, and now they read not just for information, but they read the second time for understanding what they have read. And this becomes a struggle.
Right.
They may take a single chapter or a part of a chapter and struggle with it for many, many days, reading it over and over again to try to absorb, to digest the material. Understanding. That's the second time. The third time they read it for practice. And that means they take the book, each part of the book, and if it resonates in them, they take it into their daily life, they begin to practice it. They practice it until it's digested and absorbed. And when it's absorbed, they move on to the next part. They may spend weeks on one part. And so these groups, sometimes they will spend several weeks on 1 or 2 sentences.
Yeah.
Because they see the impact, because those sentences are a shock to them, a shock of recognition.
Yeah.
And so they have to work that shock, and they work it until they feel they've digested it.
And I think that
13 languages.
Oh,
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think that, one of the reasons it's a shock because, I think a lot of people that have had a lot of experience and read a lot of different things and been meditating for a long time and all of that stuff, and I include myself in that, I could read that book and, honestly, if my teacher hadn't, even mentioned read it slow or whatever, and there are times where I'll read it. Like I've told you, I read a chapter and I'm like, oh yeah, this is great. I love it. Yeah, this is so good. I know this. Yeah, this is so true. He says it so well. And then I go back and read that chapter again and I see myself in a way that I hadn't seen it the last time. I just intellectualized the reading the first time. And then
That's correct.
In that in fact, you said you didn't get my letter yet, but in it, I think I said I was reading this chapter for the second or third time, but then I got stuck on a sentence. I felt it in such a completely different way. And it was this one sentence that I was just started grappling with. And
Here's why
yeah,
here's why that happens, Abby. The
yeah,
reason that happens is I will come to the same part of the book again, and it's as if I never read that before.
yes,
Oh
completely.
my God, I never understood that. Okay, well, here's why. The being evolves, and as the being evolves, understanding evolves.
Mm.
And the being comes to that different than it did the first time, with greater understanding. And that then the being understanding, which is intuitive, has evolved to the point where it sees with new eyes. And Jesus, that good master, always ended all of his Dharma talks by saying the same thing. Every time he gave a Dharma talk, he said at the end, let those who have eyes to see, see, and those who have ears to hear, hear. And so I have new eyes. That means the eyes I see with, and but the internal eyes, the eyes that intuition and insight sees with. Insight, sight, insight. I see with new eyes, and I appreciate with new understanding.
Yeah.
Can't read it once and put it on the shelf like I did with this book of fiction. This book has to be taken back down and looked at again and again, because it is a continuing process. The book is a process. It's not a product.
Yeah. I feel that. Yes. Oh my gosh. Thank you so very much. I'm going to break this into 2 episodes, I think. What do you want to leave people with, Red Hawk? Like, what is it that you would want if you could convey one message to anyone? What do you want people listening to know?
So let me just take a minute, may I?
Yes, please do.
Let me just take a minute to consider what you've just said.
Take as much time as you'd like.
Okay, so I'm going to say, first of all, you don't have to know. You have to be.
Mm.
Knowing is not being. That's the first thing.
Oh, so good.
The second thing I would want to say is, live your dying. Laugh your living. Love your leaving. Live your dying. Laugh your living. Love your leaving. And the last thing I would want to say is what's called the great law. The earth gave me this law. I'm a lover of the earth. I'm an earthman. I love the earth. She is my mother. And she taught me at a time when I was desperate.
Mm.
Here's what she taught me. She taught me what's called the great law. The great law is this: pay attention, go slow, be still. Pay attention, go slow, be still. I love you, Abby. I'm so grateful for you.
Oh, yes, I have chills all over from those, especially the second piece. Thank you so much for being here.
My honor and privilege, Abby.
Thanks for listening. If you found what you heard useful, share it with someone you love. Podcasts like the Intuition Incubator, while ranking in the top 5%, thrive on your support. Like the episode, leave a 5-star review, show up on YouTube at The Conscious Edge, and comment with your newfound wisdom, suggestions for future episodes, but most of all, so we can be in this together. Until next time.